Linda C., actually perched on the edge of an overstuffed velvet chair near the French doors of the Santiago Estate's grand ballroom, balancing a delicate porcelain teacup in her hands. The upscale charity gala her friend had invited her to as a +1 swirled around her in a blur of designer gowns and glittering jewelry. Conversation and laughter echoed beneath the crystal chandeliers as impeccably dressed guests circulated with champagne flutes. Linda felt acutely out of place in her borrowed peach cocktail dress, a working-class transplant among what was clearly old money and elite society. She had eagerly accepted the invitation to what she thought was a networking event, grateful for the chance to rub elbows with successful professionals. Unaware that the Santiago family hosted a very different kind of business. Needing a moment to collect herself away from the intimidating crowd, Linda had retreated to a quieter corner near the tall windows. She sipped her Earl Grey tea, letting its familiar warmth steady her nerves. That's when she noticed him. Across the marble expanse stood a man slightly apart from a cluster of older gentlemen. Tall and commanding in a perfectly tailored black suit. He was strikingly handsome in a sharp, aristocratic way, like a Roman statue carved from marble and given breath. Even from this distance, he radiated control, power, and authority. Unlike the animated guests around him, this man's expression remained serious, his dark eyes constantly scanning the room as though cataloging threats and calculating responses. Linda found herself wondering who he was. Perhaps the host's son, or some visiting dignitary her friend had mentioned. As Linda observed, an elegant figure materialized beside her chair without warning. She startled, nearly spilling her tea. Christy Tolbert settled gracefully into the adjacent seat, resplendent in a black lace evening gown that probably cost more than Linda's monthly rent. Silver streaked through her perfectly styled dark hair, and though her smile was practiced and warm, her eyes held a desperate edge. Before Linda could offer a polite greeting, Christy leaned in close, bringing with her a subtle cloud of expensive perfume and an urgent whisper. "Pretend you're my son's fiancée." Linda blinked, certain she'd misheard over the ambient noise. "I'm sorry, what?" Christy's manicured hand found Linda's wrist beneath the table, her grip firm but trembling. "Please," she breathed, voice low and intense. "It's an emergency. Just for this afternoon. I wouldn't ask if lives didn't depend on it." Linda's heart kicked against her ribs. Pretend to be your son's fiancé? Her gaze instinctively found the man in the black suit again. He had turned slightly, revealing a sharp jawline and the kind of bone structure that belonged on magazine covers. He seemed to be in conversation with the older men, but his posture was tense, guarded. That must be Arthur Santiago, Christy's son. The one her friend had mentioned in passing as intensely private and complicated. Linda certainly hadn't heard anything about an engagement. She looked back at Christy, bewilderment flooding her. The older woman's composed facade was cracking at the edges, genuine panic flickering beneath her society smile. Whatever this was, it wasn't a joke or a misunderstanding. 1,000 questions crowded Linda's mind, but movement in her peripheral vision drew Christy's attention past Linda's shoulder. "Those men approaching," Christy whispered, and now Linda heard unmistakable fear threading through her voice. "Don Salvatore and his associates. They must believe Arthur is engaged. Settled. There's no time to explain more." Her grip on Linda's wrist tightened almost painfully. "Will you help us, Linda? Please. Linda followed the older woman's gaze. 3 men in expensive suits were crossing the ballroom floor with the kind of purposeful stride that parted the crowd like water. The eldest, presumably Don Salvatore, was silver-haired and distinguished, but there was something predatory in the way he moved. The guests around him offered polite nods and greetings that seemed more like submission than friendliness. Even the ambient laughter seemed to dim as they passed. Linda couldn't identify what about their approach set off alarm bells in her hindbrain, but every instinct screamed that these were dangerous men wearing the mask of civility. Her mouth went dry. She barely knew the Santiago family beyond her friend's casual mentions. But Christie's desperation was genuine and raw. And if men like Don Salvatore expected Arthur to have a fiancée, what would they do if they discovered it was a lie? Linda's practical mind screamed to politely decline and excuse herself to the restroom, to disappear from whatever this situation was before it trapped her. But Christie's plea, "Lives depend on it," echoed in her ears. That wasn't hyperbole. She could see it in the older woman's eyes. Linda's chronic inability to refuse someone in genuine need made the decision before her rational mind could veto it. She gave the smallest nod, her heart hammering so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. "All right," she whispered. "I'll do it." Relief crashed across Christie's features like a wave. In an instant, the older woman's demeanor shifted. She rose smoothly, drawing Linda up with her, looping a supportive arm through Linda's in a gesture of practiced warmth and familiarity. Linda tried to control her trembling as Don Salvatore and his associates arrived before them like sharks gliding into shallow water. "Christie, buonasera," Don Salvatore greeted in a voice like aged whiskey, smooth but with an edge that could cut. He bent to brush polite kisses near Christie's cheeks in the continental fashion. He was tall and carried himself with the confidence of a man accustomed to absolute deference. His smile was courteous, but his dark eyes held a calculating coldness as they swept over Linda with unsettling thoroughness. "And who is this lovely young lady? I don't believe we've been introduced." Christie's smile never wavered, though Linda felt the woman's arm tense against hers. "This is Linda C. Ashley," she said, her voice carrying just the right note of maternal pride and affection. She patted Linda's arm gently. "My son Arthur's fiancée." Linda forced her expression into what she hoped resembled a natural smile, even as Don Salvatore's penetrating gaze seemed to dissect her. A flicker of surprise crossed his distinguished features, quickly smoothed behind that thin smile. "Fiancée," he repeated, the word hanging in the air like a question and a challenge. "How delightful and unexpected." Arthur has been quite private about his personal life. "It's a recent development," Christie replied smoothly, her tone light and conversational. "With everything happening in the family, we haven't had time to make a formal announcement." "I see." Don Salvatore's smile remained fixed, but his eyes sharpened with interest or suspicion. Linda couldn't tell which. "The Santiago family continues to surprise me." Just then, a firm presence materialized at Linda's other side. A warm hand settled possessively at the small of her back. "Don Salvatore," came a deep, controlled voice. "I see you've met Linda." Linda turned her head and found herself looking up into Arthur Santiago's face. Up close, he was even more imposing, broad-shouldered and impeccably groomed, with storm-gray eyes that assessed the scene with the kind of cool control that comes from a lifetime of navigating danger. A polite half-smile touched his lips, though Linda could sense coiled tension beneath his composed exterior, like a predator ready to strike if necessary. Don Salvatore's expression shifted into something that might have been genuine pleasure. "Arthur, my congratulations. You've kept this engagement remarkably quiet." Arthur's hand at Linda's waist drew her subtly but firmly against his side. The contact was startling in its intimacy, protective and possessive at once. Linda's breath caught, but she understood immediately. This was part of the performance. He was claiming her, marking territory. His hand rested warm and steady against the fabric of her dress at her hip. "Thank you, Don Salvatore," Arthur said evenly, his voice carrying the kind of polite steel that discouraged further questions. "We didn't want to overshadow other family matters. An announcement can wait until the timing is more appropriate." "How considerate," Don Salvatore replied, though an edge of something, disappointment, calculation, colored his genial tone. His eyes flicked between Arthur's arm around Linda and Arthur's carefully neutral expression. "I admit, I'm pleased you found a match on your own terms, given that our previous conversations about alliances didn't seem to interest you." Linda felt Arthur's grip on her waist tighten almost imperceptibly, a flash of tension quickly controlled. "I prefer to make my own choices in personal matters," he said, a note of quiet authority threading through his courteous words. "I'm sure you understand, Don Salvatore." Of course. The older man's tone remained amicable, but a muscle tightened in his jaw. After a weighted pause, he inclined his head with practiced grace. "Well, I must pay my respects to the other guests. Enjoy your evening, Arthur." His gaze slid to Linda, and he reached for her free hand, lifting it to brush his lips across her knuckles in an old-world gesture that felt more like a threat than courtesy. "And welcome to the family, Miss Ashley. I look forward to getting to know you better." "The pleasure is mine," Linda managed, her voice steadier than she felt. Don Salvatore released her hand and moved away, his associates falling into step behind him. The moment he was out of earshot, Arthur released Linda's waist as though the contact burned him. Christy exhaled a shaky breath she'd been holding, her composed mask slipping just enough to reveal the terror beneath. "I'm sorry it had to be so sudden," Christy said, voice barely above a whisper. "Salvatore cornered me earlier, pressing about Arthur's availability. I panicked. Mama, what have you done?" Arthur cut in, his tone hushed but edged with controlled fury. Linda flinched at the dangerous undercurrent in his voice. Arthur's storm-gray eyes fixed on his mother, then shifted to Linda with an intensity that made her feel pinned like a specimen under glass. "Who exactly are you?" he demanded under his breath, each word clipped and precise. "And why would you agree to this charade?" Linda straightened despite her racing pulse, bristling at his accusatory tone even as fear crawled up her spine. "I'm your mother's guest," she whispered back, forcing herself to hold his gaze. "She asked for my help. She said lives depended on it. I was trying to do the right thing." Christy placed a placating hand on Arthur's arm, her expression pleading. "Don't blame her, Arthur. I pulled Linda into this at the last minute." Salvatore was pushing me about that arranged marriage alliance with the Corsini family. I panicked and said you were already engaged. He insisted on meeting your fiancé this afternoon. She cast an apologetic glance at Linda. So Arthur muttered something under his breath in what might have been Italian or Spanish. Linda couldn't tell. He turned slightly, angling himself to shield both women from curious onlookers nearby. Around them, the gala continued obliviously, guests laughing, glasses clinking, chamber music playing. Yet an invisible knife seemed to hang suspended over their heads. "This is dangerous," Arthur said, his voice low and taut with barely restrained emotion. "If Don Salvatore even suspects this engagement is fabricated." He let the sentence hang, unfinished, but the implication was clear as crystal. Linda felt the blood drain from her face. She had known helping was risky when she'd agreed, but hearing Arthur confirm that lives were literally at stake made it horrifyingly real. "Understood," she managed, her voice smaller than she'd intended. "Good." His eyes bored into hers, fierce, unyielding, assessing whether she truly grasped the gravity. Then something shifted in his expression, a flicker of resigned determination. "Then stay close to me for the rest of the afternoon. Do exactly as I say. Don't improvise, don't elaborate." His jaw tightened. "If we're convincing enough, we might all survive this." Linda swallowed hard and managed a faint nod. "All right." Arthur offered his arm to her with the kind of cordial smile that would look natural to anyone watching from a distance. "Shall we?" His voice had shifted back to that smooth, controlled register, the performance resuming. Linda placed her trembling hand on his arm, feeling the solid strength beneath the expensive fabric of his suit jacket. He guided her away from their quiet corner toward the glittering heart of the ballroom, where Don Salvatore and his associates mingled with other guests whose polite smiles didn't quite reach their eyes. Less than 10 minutes ago, she'd been a nobody sipping tea alone at a charity event. Now she was on the arm of a man who radiated lethal competence, pretending to be in love under the watchful eyes of dangerous men who measured value in power and territory. As they stepped into the crowd and Arthur's hand settled protectively at her waist again, Linda understood with chilling clarity, in whatever world the Santiago family inhabited, there were no harmless favors. And lies, once told, would be paid for in blood. Christie pulled Linda into a private alcove behind a marble column, her movements urgent but practiced. "Listen carefully, we don't have much time," she whispered, reaching for Linda's left hand. Before Linda could process what was happening, Christie slid a vintage sapphire ring onto her finger. The weight of it felt like a shackle. "You and Arthur have been dating for 6 months. You met at a gallery opening in the city, contemporary art exhibit. He proposed last month over dinner at Marcello's. Keep your answers simple. If you don't know something, let him fill in the details." Linda's head spun. 6 months? But I don't know anything about. You don't need to know everything. Just enough. Christie's fingers tightened on Linda's shoulders. "They're testing him, don't you understand? Testing whether he's stable enough, committed enough to lead. If they think he's lying." She didn't finish, but the fear in her eyes completed the sentence. Before Linda could ask who they were, Christy was already guiding her back toward the ballroom's main floor. Arthur stood near the towering windows with 3 older men, all of them dressed in suits that probably cost more than Linda's car. The conversation paused as Christy approached with Linda in tow, and Linda felt the weight of their collective attention like a physical force. "Gentlemen," Arthur said smoothly, his hand finding the small of Linda's back again, warm, possessive, grounding. "Allow me to introduce Linda Ashley. My fiancée." The word hung in the air, and Linda watched the men's reactions carefully. Don Salvatore stood in the center, silver-haired and distinguished, with the kind of face that belonged on currency. To his left, a heavy-set man with cold eyes studied Linda like she was livestock at auction. The third, younger but no less intimidating, simply smiled without warmth. "Miss Ashley," Don Salvatore said, his voice carrying the faint trace of an accent Linda couldn't place. "What a pleasure. Arthur has been remarkably secretive about you." "He values his privacy," Linda managed, forcing herself to meet those calculating eyes. "We both do." "Privacy." "Yes." Don Salvatore stepped closer, and Linda resisted the urge to retreat. "Tell me, how did a man as particular as Arthur manage to sweep you off your feet?" Linda opened her mouth, her mind suddenly blank. 6 months. Gallery opening. What kind of art? Before panic could fully set in, Arthur's thumb traced a subtle circle against her back, a silent message. "Trust me." "I'm not sure I'd say he swept me anywhere," Linda said, finding her footing. "It was more of a slow burn. We kept running into each other at various events, and eventually, I stopped pretending I wasn't completely captivated," Arthur finished, his voice carrying just enough warmth to sound genuine. His eyes found hers, and for a moment, Linda almost believed him. "It took me 3 weeks to convince her to have coffee with me." Persistent, the heavy-set man commented, something predatory in his smile. "That's good. A man should fight for what he wants." Don Salvatore's gaze never left Linda's face. "And your family, Miss Ashley? What do they think of this arrangement?" The word arrangement landed with deliberate weight. Linda felt Arthur's hand press more firmly against her back, a warning, not comfort. These men knew something was off. They were probing for weaknesses. "They're thrilled," Linda said, lifting her chin. "Though I imagine they'll be even more thrilled when we finally set a date." "Indeed." Don Salvatore's thin smile didn't reach his eyes. He glanced at Arthur, then back to Linda, as if comparing them to some internal standard. "Well," he said finally, "we shall see if this arrangement is suitable." The words felt like a threat wrapped in silk, and as the men moved away to rejoin the other guests, Linda realized with chilling clarity, these weren't business associates. They were predators in expensive suits, and she and Arthur were being evaluated like prey. Arthur's hand remained steady against her back. "Breathe," he murmured. "You did well." But Linda's heart was hammering, because she understood now, there would be no walking away from this performance. Not until these dangerous men decided their show was convincing enough. Or until someone decided it wasn't. The moment the older men dispersed into the crowd, Arthur's hand closed around Linda's elbow, not roughly, but with unmistakable authority. He guided her through a side door into a wood-paneled study lined with leather-bound books. The door clicked shut, muffling the ballroom's ambient noise. "You did well," Arthur said without preamble, releasing her and moving to the window. His back was to her, shoulders rigid. "But they're suspicious. We need to be more convincing." Linda wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm room. "What do you mean, more convincing?" He turned, and the warmth from earlier had vanished entirely. His expression was all business, cold, assessing, tactical. "Don Salvatore didn't believe us. He's going to dig deeper, ask more questions. We need our stories to align perfectly." Arthur pulled out his phone, fingers moving rapidly across the screen. "Your full name, occupation, where you're from, family structure. Go." The rapid-fire interrogation made Linda's head spin. "Linda Catherine Atchley. I'm a marketing coordinator for a tech startup. Originally from Ohio, moved here 3 years ago. My parents are divorced, mom's a teacher, dad's an accountant. I have one younger brother." Arthur nodded curtly, typing notes. "Allergies? Phobias? Favorite food?" What? Why would they ask? They'll ask your favorite meal, and I need to know if you'd order it at dinner. Couples know these things. His gray eyes pinned her. "Answer the question." "Shellfish allergy. Afraid of heights. I like Italian food." Linda's voice came out sharper than intended. "Is this really necessary? If you want to survive the next few hours?" "Yes." Arthur set his phone aside. "I'm 32. I oversee the family's import-export operations. I prefer Scotch, neat. I run 5 miles every morning. My mother claims I'm impossible to shop for because I never want anything." He paused, something flickering behind his controlled mask. "And I'm being forced into an arranged marriage I don't want because the family considers me a liability without a wife." The admission hung between them, and Linda saw it clearly. Arthur wasn't the villain orchestrating this disaster. He was as trapped as she was, just in a different cage. "So your mother wasn't exaggerating," Linda said quietly. "About the danger." "My mother never exaggerates about survival." Arthur's jaw tightened. "If Don Salvatore and the other families think I'm unstable or unwilling to settle down, they'll push for the Corsini alliance. And if I refuse that—" He didn't finish, but Linda understood. Refusal meant consequences she didn't want to imagine. A knock at the door interrupted them. A young man in server's attire cracked it open. "Mr. Santiago, your mother says dinner is ready." Arthur nodded, then turned back to Linda. The coldness in his expression softened fractionally, not warmth exactly, but something closer to resignation. "We're about to sit through a formal dinner with all of them watching. Every word, every gesture." He crossed to her and extended his hand. "Stay close to me. Don't answer any questions about my business dealings. If someone corners you with something you can't answer." He paused, his storm gray eyes holding hers. Kiss me. It'll buy time and look affectionate enough to change the subject. Linda's breath caught. You want me to. I want you to survive this, Arthur corrected, his voice low and intense. And right now, that means selling them on a relationship convincing enough that they stop asking questions we can't answer. He opened the door, and the sounds of the gala flooded back in laughter, clinking glasses, the string quartet. Arthur took her hand, his grip warm and steady, and Linda realized with sinking certainty there was no graceful exit from this performance. She was in the middle of it now, standing on a stage where one wrong line could get them both killed. As they walked toward the dining room, Arthur leaned close enough that his breath stirred her hair. Just follow my lead, he murmured. And trust me. Trust. The word felt absurd given they'd met less than an hour ago. But as Linda felt the weight of dangerous eyes tracking their movement across the ballroom, she understood she had no choice. She was in too deep to do anything but play her part. The dining room was all old-world elegance, crystal chandeliers, damask wallpaper, a table that could seat 20 but held only 7. Linda found herself positioned between Arthur and Christie, directly across from Don Salvatore. Vincent Caruso, a lean man with sharp features and sharper eyes, sat to the Don's right. Don Carmine, the heavy-set man from earlier, occupied the left. White-gloved servers appeared with the first course, some kind of delicate seafood arrangement Linda didn't recognize. She reached for her water glass to steady her hands. So, Miss Ashley, Don Salvatore began, cutting into his appetizer with surgical precision. Your family, what business are they in? Linda felt Arthur's hand find her knee beneath the table, a warning pressure. My father's an accountant, she said carefully. My mother teaches high school English. Nothing particularly exciting. Honest work, Don Carmine observed, though his tone suggested he found such honesty quaint. And they approve of Arthur? They haven't met him yet, Linda said, then immediately regretted it. Too much information. Vincent Caruso's eyes glinted with interest. No? That's unusual for an engaged couple. When's the meeting planned? Linda's mind went blank. She had no answer for that. Arthur's hand tightened on her knee, but before he could intervene, Linda turned to him and leaned in, pressing her lips to his. The kiss was meant to be quick, tactical, a distraction. But the moment their mouths met, something unexpected sparked. Arthur's free hand came up to cup her jaw, holding her there a beat longer than necessary. When they parted, Linda's heart was racing for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. Soon, Arthur said smoothly to the table, his thumb brushing Linda's cheek in a gesture that looked tender but felt like a steadying anchor. We're coordinating schedules. The servers cleared the first course and brought the second. Conversation flowed around safer topics, the weather, recent cultural events, the quality of the wine. But Linda felt the undercurrent of assessment in every pause, every exchanged glance between the older men. I knew a man once, Don Salvatore said during the third course, his voice taking on a storytelling quality. Promising young fellow. He thought he could present one face to us while hiding another. Thought loyalty was something he could fake. The Don's knife scraped against porcelain. We discovered his deception, naturally. These things always come to light. The table had gone quiet. Linda's fork stilled halfway to her mouth. Disloyalty, Don Salvatore continued, meeting Arthur's eyes across the table, is always corrected. Permanently. He smiled then, all politeness. But I'm sure that's not relevant here. After all, Arthur has always been a man of his word. Haven't you, Arthur? Always, Arthur replied, his voice carrying a steel edge beneath the courtesy. Vincent leaned forward slightly. And Miss Ashley, you understand what you're becoming part of? The Santiago family has particular expectations. Linda felt trapped in his gaze, like a butterfly pinned to a board. Arthur's hand moved from her knee to the back of her chair, a possessive gesture. Linda understands perfectly, he said. Don't you, Cara? It was a lifeline and a test. Linda turned to Arthur again, and this time when she kissed him, it wasn't just tactical. His hand slid to the nape of her neck, and for a moment, the dangerous men surrounding them ceased to exist. There was only the warmth of his mouth, the steady strength of him anchoring her in the storm. When they broke apart, Don Salvatore was watching with an expression Linda couldn't read. Young love, he murmured. How refreshing. The dinner continued through dessert and coffee, but Linda barely tasted anything. Every question felt like a trapdoor waiting to open beneath her feet. By the time the servers cleared the final plates, her nerves were frayed to breaking. As guests began to disperse, Vincent Caruso appeared at Arthur's elbow. A moment? His smile was pleasant, but his eyes were cold calculation. He nodded to Linda. I'm looking forward to learning more about Miss Ashley. Quite thoroughly. The words were polite. The threat was unmistakable. Arthur's hand found Linda's, squeezing once, a silent message. We're not safe yet. As Vincent walked away, Linda understood with bone-deep certainty the performance wasn't over. It was only beginning. And the penalty for a bad review wasn't embarrassment. It was death. Arthur didn't speak until they were back in the study with the door locked. Then he turned on her, his controlled facade cracking. Vincent is going to investigate you. Thoroughly. He's probably already made calls. Linda's stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means he's checking your background right now, social media, employment records, looking for connections to rival families or law enforcement. Arthur ran a hand through his hair, the first unguarded gesture she'd seen from him. He's suspicious, and Vincent doesn't leave loose ends. But I'm nobody, Linda said, hearing the edge of panic in her own voice. There's nothing to find because we just met today. What happens when he realizes that? Arthur's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath his skin. Then we both have a problem. You're a witness to family business now. If they think you're a spy, or a liar, or any kind of threat. He didn't finish the sentence, but Linda saw it in his eyes. The same fate as the disloyal man from Don Salvatore's dinner story. Oh God. Linda sank into a leather chair, her legs suddenly unsteady. This was supposed to be one afternoon. Just helping your mother through one afternoon. I know. Arthur's voice softened fractionally. But we're past that now. We have maybe 24 hours before Vincent completes his investigation. He pulled out his phone, fingers already moving. So we're going to build you a complete false identity. Airtight. Every detail documented, every story corroborated. Then we feed it to Vincent before he digs too deep. Linda stared at him. You can do that? Just create a fake person? I have resources. Arthur's expression was grim as he placed the first call, speaking rapid fire in what sounded like a mix of English and Italian. Names Linda didn't recognize. Terms like backdated posts and verified timestamps and clean injection. Over the next 3 hours, Linda watched Arthur orchestrate what could only be described as identity fraud on a massive scale. Forgers, hackers, fixers, people who could plant fake social media posts months in the past, create restaurant receipts, even bribe witnesses to remember seeing them together. The ease with which Arthur commanded this criminal network was both impressive and terrifying. Now the hard part, Arthur said finally, setting his phone aside. He pulled up a chair across from her. We need to memorize a shared history. Every detail. First date, where, when, what you wore, what we talked about. This is insane, Linda whispered. This is survival. Arthur's gray eyes held hers. First date. Let's say, the Riverside Gallery, 6 months ago. Contemporary art exhibit. You wore a green dress. We argued about a painting, abstract expressionism. You said it looked like chaos. I said it looked like freedom. Despite everything, Linda found herself drawn into the fiction. And then? Then I asked you to coffee. You said no. I asked again the next week at a charity auction. You said no again. A ghost of a smile touched Arthur's mouth. You made me work for it. They spend hours building their false history, first kiss in the rain outside a bookstore, first fight over Arthur's workaholic tendencies, inside jokes that never actually happened. The absurdity of creating intimate memories with a stranger should have felt ridiculous, but in the quiet study with danger circling outside, it felt like building a life raft. Around midnight, Linda stood abruptly. I should just leave. Disappear before this gets worse. New city, new name. They'll find you. Arthur's voice cut through her panic with brutal honesty. You know too much now. Vincent has your face, your real name. If you run, you become a confirmed threat. He stood, moving closer. The only safety is in making the lie true enough to be believed. Linda's hands were shaking. So I'm trapped. We're both trapped, Arthur corrected quietly. But if we do this right, we stay alive. His hand found hers, warm and steady. Trust me a little longer. Linda looked down at their joined hands, his strong and certain, hers trembling. She was in too deep to surface now. All she could do was dive deeper and hope they both reached the other side. By dawn, Arthur's team had worked miracles. Linda watched on his laptop as fake Instagram posts materialized, photos of her and Arthur that had never been taken, time-stamped months ago. Restaurant receipts from dates they'd never had. even a florist's record of Arthur sending her roses on her birthday. It's like we're ghosts haunting our own fake past, Linda murmured. Arthur's phone buzzed. He read the message and his expression hardened. Vincent wants more. He says documentation can be fabricated. He wants to observe us together, naturally, unguarded. He looked at her. He's demanding I bring you to my private quarters. To prove we're comfortable with each other. Linda's pulse quickened. Your quarters? As in, my bedroom, yes. Arthur stood, exhaustion evident in the shadows under his eyes. He's likely already planted surveillance. We'll be watched, even in what should be private moments. His jaw tightened. We have to behave like a real couple. Which means sharing a bed. The walk through the estate's corridors felt surreal. Dawn light filtered through tall windows as Arthur led her to the third floor, to a suite that was surprisingly understated, dark wood furniture, neat bookshelves, a large bed with navy linens. Masculine but not ostentatious. The cameras could be anywhere, Arthur said quietly, shrugging off his suit jacket. So we assume everywhere. He handed her one of his shirts. You should change. Try to look comfortable. In the bathroom, Linda changed with shaking hands. When she emerged in Arthur's oversized shirt, he dimmed the lights and was sitting on the edge of the bed, still in his dress pants but shirt unbuttoned. He looked unexpectedly vulnerable. We should sleep, he said. Or at least pretend to. They lay down on opposite sides of the bed, a careful distance between them. The silence stretched, heavy with awareness that unseen eyes might be watching. Then Arthur spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I was 7 when my father brought me to my first business meeting. I watched him break a man's hand for stealing from the family. His profile was barely visible in the dim light. He told me that's what loyalty costs. That's what this life demands. Linda turned toward him. You never had a choice, did you? None. The word carried years of resignation. I was born into this. The violence, the power plays, the constant calculation. Some days I imagine what it would be like to just disappear. Open a bookstore in some quiet town where nobody knows my name. He laughed softly, bitterly. But those are children's dreams. They shouldn't be. Linda's hand found his in the darkness between them. Everyone deserves the chance to choose their own life. Arthur's fingers tightened around hers. Is that why you agreed to help my mother? Because someone asked and you couldn't say no? The observation struck too close to truth. I've always been like that, Linda admitted. My brother used to joke that I'd give away my last dollar to a stranger. When someone needs help, I can't walk away. Even when I should. That's not a weakness. Arthur turned his head to look at her. That's the kind of goodness people like me destroy. You haven't destroyed anything. Linda surprised herself with the conviction in her voice. You're trying to survive, just like me. We're both trapped, just in different cages. Something shifted in the space between them, a recognition, a connection that transcended their manufactured history. Arthur moved closer, closing the distance, and when Linda rested her head against his shoulder, it felt less like performance and more like refuge. "Tell me about your ordinary life," he murmured. "Before all this." So Linda talked about her tiny apartment with its temperamental heating, her co-workers' mundane dramas, Sunday morning farmers' markets. Simple things that felt impossibly distant now. Arthur listened, and she felt his breathing slow, his tension gradually unwinding. Somewhere in the gray light of early morning, they fell asleep tangled together, his arm around her waist, her hand over his heart. For a few stolen hours, the danger felt distant. But morning brought reality crashing back with a knock on the door and a voice calling Arthur's name. The storm was far from over. Linda woke to find Arthur already gone, a note on the pillow, business calls. Stay in the suite or grounds. Guards will escort you. The formality of it reminded her this wasn't a real relationship, despite how his warmth had felt through the night. Restless, she ventured out after breakfast. 2 guards shadowed her at a discreet distance as she explored the estate's sprawling corridors. The mansion was a labyrinth of marble hallways and closed doors, each wing seeming to lead to another. After 20 minutes, Linda realized she'd taken a wrong turn somewhere near the east wing. She paused at an intersection of hallways, trying to orient herself, when voices drifted through a door left slightly ajar. She recognized Vincent Caruso's clipped tones immediately. "The girl is clean, too clean." Vincent's voice carried an edge of frustration. "Nobody's that ordinary. She's either incredibly boring or incredibly smart at covering tracks." Linda froze, her heart suddenly hammering. She should walk away. But her feet wouldn't move. Don Carmine's gravelly voice responded. "Either way, she's a problem. If Arthur's really attached, she's leverage against him. If he's faking, she's a witness to family business." "Exactly." Vincent again, cold and calculated. "So we solve both problems tonight. Make it look like a lover's quarrel gone wrong. Arthur kills his fiancée in a rage, overwhelmed by the pressure. Then we kill Arthur, claiming we were protecting the family from his instability." Linda's blood turned to ice. Her hand found the wall for support. A third voice, one she didn't recognize, spoke up. "The girl's body backs up our story. Crime of passion. Arthur's removed, and we divide his territory. The Corsini family gets their alliance through Valentina instead. Everyone wins. Except Arthur and the girl," Don Carmine said with something almost like amusement. "Collateral damage." Vincent's tone was matter of fact. "We move at dinner tonight. During the toast. Lights will be dim, security focused on the main hall. It'll be over in minutes." Linda pressed her fist against her mouth to contain a gasp. This wasn't about suspicion anymore. This wasn't about investigation. She'd been marked for death the moment she agreed to help Christie, a convenient patsy to justify a coup. They were going to murder her and Arthur both, and frame it as a tragic lover's quarrel to seize his territory. Tonight. Hours from now. Footsteps approached the door from inside the room. Linda turned and walked swiftly back the way she'd come, forcing herself not to run despite every instinct screaming at her to flee. The guards fell into step behind her, oblivious to what she just heard. Her mind raced. She could run. Right now. Tell the guards she needed to leave, make up an emergency, disappear into the city before Vincent's plan unfolded. Let Arthur face whatever came. He was part of this world. He understood the risks. But even as the thought formed, Linda knew she couldn't. Arthur sleeping beside her last night, his quiet confession of dreams he'd never pursue. The way he'd protected her at dinner, guided her through every dangerous moment. He was trapped in this life just as surely as she was trapped in this lie. If she ran, he would die. And despite the absurdity of it, despite knowing him for barely 36 hours, Linda couldn't live with that. She found her way back to the main wing and stopped one of the guards. I need to see Arthur. Now. It's urgent. The guard's expression didn't change. Mr. Santiago is in meetings. I don't care. Linda's voice came out sharper than intended. Tell him Linda needs to speak with him immediately. Tell him it's about tonight. Something in her tone must have conveyed the gravity, because the guard nodded and spoke quietly into his radio. Within 5 minutes, Arthur appeared, his expression tight with concern. What's wrong? Linda waited until they were alone in an empty sitting room. Then she grabbed his arm, her fingers digging in. They're going to kill us both, she whispered. Tonight. Vincent and Don Carmine. They're planning to make it look like you killed me, then kill you. Arthur's face went completely still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. Tell me everything, he said quietly. Every word you heard. Arthur listened to Linda's breathless account with a face carved from stone. When she finished, something dangerous flickered behind his eyes, not anger at her, but cold, lethal fury at the betrayal. He pulled out his phone, fingers moving with deadly precision. Marco, I need you and the team in my office. Now. Full tactical. He ended the call and turned to Linda. I'm sending you away. Right now. My men will take you somewhere safe, a secure location outside the city. No. Linda's voice was firmer than she expected. Arthur's jaw tightened. This isn't negotiable. They're planning to kill you. They're planning to kill us both, Linda interrupted. And Vincent's story only works if I'm here and dead. If I disappear, he has to adjust his entire plan. Maybe delay. You need me here as bait. Absolutely not. Arthur moved closer, his hands gripping her shoulders. I won't use you that way. You're not using me. I'm choosing. Linda held his gaze. If I run, you die. I'm not leaving. Something shifted in Arthur's expression, frustration warring with reluctant admiration. You're impossibly stubborn. So I've been told. The next hours passed in tense preparation. Arthur's loyal guards swept the estate, securing exits, checking weapons. Linda watched Arthur transform from the controlled businessman into something far more dangerous, a man who'd grown up in violence and knew exactly how to wield it. He moved with lethal efficiency, checking ammunition, coordinating positions, his every gesture speaking to years of survival in a world where hesitation meant death. "Stay behind me," he told Linda as evening approached. "No matter what happens, stay behind cover." They set the trap in the private dining room, a supposed intimate dinner for two. Candles flickered on the table. Wine glasses waited, untouched. Arthur had positioned his men in adjacent rooms, but to Vincent's surveillance, it would look like they were alone. The attack came at 8:15, sudden and brutal. The dining room door exploded inward. Vincent burst through with 4 armed men, guns already raised. "Such a shame," Vincent said, his voice carrying false regret. "Young love," cut short by Arthur's unstable temper. He never finished. Arthur had been waiting. He flipped the table, and gunfire erupted, deafening in the enclosed space. Linda dropped behind an overturned chair, hands over her ears, the smell of gunpowder choking her. The world reduced to muzzle flashes and shouting and the thunder of bullets tearing through wood and plaster. Through the chaos, Linda saw one of Vincent's men circling left, flanking Arthur's position. Arthur was focused on Vincent and 2 others advancing from the front. He didn't see the threat creeping behind him. Linda didn't think. A fallen pistol lay 3 feet away. She lunged for it, fingers closing around cold metal. The man raised his weapon, finger tightening on the trigger aimed at Arthur's unprotected back. Linda pulled her trigger first. The recoil slammed through her wrists. The man jerked backward, red blooming across his chest. He crumpled. The sound of her own gunshot seemed to echo forever. Arthur spun, saw the fallen man, saw Linda with the smoking gun. His eyes widened with understanding and something like horror. But there was no time. He pivoted back, taking down another attacker with clinical precision. His guards burst in from the side entrance, and suddenly Vincent's remaining men were caught in crossfire. 2 more dropped. Vincent, bleeding from his shoulder, scrambled toward a service exit. "Stop him!" Arthur shouted, but Vincent disappeared into the corridor, leaving a trail of blood. Silence fell, broken only by Linda's ragged breathing. The dead man lay 5 feet away, eyes staring at nothing. She'd done that. Taken a life. Ended someone's existence with one squeeze of her finger. Her stomach revolted. She barely made it to a corner before vomiting, her whole body shaking uncontrollably. Arthur was there instantly, pulling her hair back, his hand steady on her shoulder. "Breathe. Just breathe." "I killed him," Linda gasped between retches. "I killed. You saved my life." Arthur's voice was fierce. He turned her to face him, his hands framing her face. "Do you understand? He would have killed me. You saved my life." Linda's vision blurred with tears. The weight of what she'd done crushed down on her, no going back, no undoing it. She'd crossed a line written in blood. And Vincent had escaped, which meant the war was far from over. Arthur's cleanup crew worked with disturbing efficiency, bodies wrapped in plastic, blood scrubbed from marble, bullet holes plastered over. Within an hour, the dining room looked untouched, as though violence had never shattered the elegant space. Linda watched from a chair in Arthur's study, wrapped in a blanket despite the room's warmth. She couldn't stop shaking. Arthur knelt before her with a basin of warm water and a clean cloth. "Give me your hands," he said quietly. Linda looked down. Her hands were still stained with gunpowder residue and flecks of blood, the dead man's blood. Her stomach threatened to revolt again. Arthur cleaned each finger methodically, his touch impossibly gentle. "You're in shock. That's normal. What you're feeling, the shaking, the nausea, the disbelief, it's all normal trauma response." His gray eyes met hers. "It doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. I killed someone." Linda's voice broke. "I ended a person's life. You saved mine." Arthur set the cloth aside, his hands still cradling hers. "That man would have put a bullet in my skull. You stopped him. That doesn't make it okay." Tears spilled down Linda's cheeks. "Nothing about this is okay." Arthur's expression tightened with something that might have been guilt. He stood, moving to pour 2 glasses of whiskey. He pressed one into her trembling hands. "Drink. It'll help." Linda obeyed mechanically, the alcohol burning down her throat. Arthur drank his own in one swallow, then turned to face her with the kind of expression that preceded bad news. "You can't go back to your old life." The words landed like a physical blow. Linda stared at him. "What?" "You killed a made man, someone connected to Vincent's faction. Vincent escaped. He'll report back that you're not an innocent civilian caught in the crossfire, but an active combatant who executed one of his men." Arthur's voice was flat, delivering facts without cushioning them. "You're in the life now whether you chose it or not. There's no walking away." The rage that exploded through Linda was white-hot and all-consuming. She stood, the blanket falling away. "I didn't choose any of this. Your mother asked for one afternoon. One fucking afternoon to pretend for a few hours." Her voice cracked. "How did helping someone turn into murder? How did doing the right thing destroy my entire life?" Arthur didn't flinch from her fury. "I know. And I'm sorry. But sorry doesn't change reality." "Then what am I supposed to do?" Linda's hands clenched into fists. "Just accept that I'm a killer now? That I can never go home? You have 2 options." Arthur's tone remained steady, clinical. "1, I arrange for you to disappear completely. New identity, new passport, set you up somewhere far away, South America, maybe Southeast Asia. You leave the country, never contact anyone from your old life again. I'll fund it, make sure you're comfortable. But you'll be alone, and Vincent's people will still be looking. You'll spend the rest of your life watching over your shoulder." Linda's breath came in short gasps. "And option 2? Arthur's eyes held hers. "Stay with me. Make the engagement real. Marry me." He raised a hand before she could interrupt. "Not for love. For protection. As my wife, your family. Protected by our codes, backed by our power." Vincent can't touch you without declaring war on the entire Santiago organization. You'd be safe. Safe. Linda laughed bitterly. In a cage. A gilded cage, Arthur acknowledged. But alive. So my choices are, be alone and hunted, or be your prisoner. My partner, Arthur corrected quietly. Not my prisoner. We're already bound together by what happened tonight. This just makes it official. Linda wanted to scream, to break something, to rage against the cosmic unfairness of it all. She tried to help someone in distress, one simple act of kindness, and it had metastasized into this nightmare. Her agency stripped away by her own compassion. I hate this, she whispered. I hate that you're right. I hate that I have no real choice. I know. Arthur moved closer, and for the first time, she saw genuine regret in his expression. For what it's worth, I never wanted this for you. But you'll use it anyway. Yes. He didn't pretend otherwise. Because keeping you alive matters more than your freedom. Linda closed her eyes. 2 prisons. 2 futures where she ceased to be Linda C. actually and became something else entirely. She just had to choose which cage came with better locks. Arthur's phone buzzed before Linda could respond. He glanced at the screen and his expression went dark. No, he said quietly, reading the message. Then, louder, damn it. What? Linda's exhaustion sharpened into alarm. Arthur looked up, something almost like apology in his eyes. Valentina Corsini and her father have placed a contract on you. Professional hit. Open to any taker. The words took a moment to penetrate. The woman you were supposed to marry? They blame you for stealing their alliance with my family. Arthur's hands clenched around his phone. Valentina's pride is wounded. Don Corsini sees it as a political slight. They want you dead as revenge. Linda felt something inside her simply break. Not shatter, just quietly snap, like a cord pulled too tight. So option 1 is gone. I can't disappear because professional killers will hunt me across continents. No, you can't. Arthur's voice was heavy. And option 2 is the only thing keeping me alive. Yes. Linda stood, walked to the window, stared out at the manicured grounds that might as well be prison walls. When she turned back, her voice was void of emotion. Fine. I'll be your fiancée. I'll marry you, play the devoted wife, smile for the cameras. Her eyes met his, hard as glass. But don't expect me to love you for trapping me in this life. Arthur's expression didn't change. I don't expect love. Just survival. We keep each other alive. That's the deal. Then we have a deal. The family meeting that evening felt like a funeral and a coronation at once. Don Salvatore and the remaining bosses, those not aligned with Vincent's failed coup, gathered in the main hall. Arthur stood before them with Linda at his side, her left hand bearing that sapphire ring that no longer felt like a prop. We formalize what was begun in deception, Arthur announced, his voice carrying authority. Linda actually will be my wife. Anyone who moves against her moves against me and the Santiago family. The men nodded. Alliances recalculated in real time. Linda was no longer the outsider. She was a chess piece that had reached the other side of the board and transformed into something more dangerous. Christy approached afterward, her face pale with guilt. Linda, I'm so sorry. I never meant for. Don't. Linda's voice cut like a blade. She couldn't even look at the woman who destroyed her life with a desperate whisper and a borrowed ring. Just don't. Christy's face crumpled, but she nodded and stepped away. Later, Linda found herself on the estate's balcony, the night air cool against her skin. Arthur joined her, maintaining a careful distance. They stood side by side, looking out at the darkness beyond the estate walls, a darkness now filled with threats that bore their names. I never wanted this for you, Arthur said quietly. But you'll use it anyway. Linda's tone wasn't accusatory, just factual. Yes. Silence stretched between them, not comfortable, not hostile, just heavy with reality. Then Linda reached out and took his hand. Not a romantic gesture. Not affection or forgiveness. Strategic partnership. Alliance forged in blood and necessity. Then we'd better make sure we survive it, she said. Arthur's fingers tightened around hers. Together. Together, Linda echoed, though the word tasted like ashes. Below them, guards patrolled the grounds. Somewhere in the city, Vincent plotted his next move. Across town, Valentina Corsini probably toasted Linda's future death. The Santiago family's internal power struggles simmered, waiting to boil over. And Linda C., actually, marketing coordinator, ordinary woman, chronic helper, had become Linda Santiago, Mafia wife, killer, survivor. She'd agreed to fake an engagement for one afternoon. Now she was bound to this man, this life, this war, for however long either of them lasted. Whether that alliance would evolve into something genuine or toxic, whether they'd save each other or destroy each other, remained to be seen. But standing there in the darkness with their hands joined and enemies circling, Linda understood one truth with perfect clarity. She'd lost her innocence and her choice. But in that loss, she'd gained something else: power, position, and the cold comfort of knowing she wouldn't face the coming storm alone. The war had just begun. And Linda intended to survive it. Whatever the cost.